Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 504, The Spiritual Disease of Ignorance, Part 4, An Intro to Error, the Focal Degree of Ignorance. The podcast objectives are analyze the connection between disregard and complacency, analyze our wars with the degrees of lawlessness, reveal the focal degree of ignorance, and analyze the path men follow when they fall into error. Welcome. Now, before we begin today's lesson, I would like to welcome all my beloved brothers and sisters in Yahushua Messiah who have been scattered to the four corners of the earth, who Yahuwah has joined to this ministry for such a time as this. I would also like to welcome anyone who is engaging our podcasts or videos for the first time. We trust you were led by the set apart spirit in finding us. And if you continue to be led, we hope you stay with us, for these are troubling times and an evil day is just ahead. To this end, if you are watching this video on YouTube and you have not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button below and you will be alerted whenever we post new videos. Also, if you have any questions at the conclusion of this video, you can ask them using the link in the podcast description below the video player. Last but not least, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up so YouTube can share it with believers like us. If we are not being transformed. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 435 of our exposition of lawlessness. Recently, we began our analysis of the fundamental degree of ignorance. Enter disregard. Now, in addition to all the dangers of disregard we discussed last week, there is a deadly association between disregard and complacency, to wit, the one degree of lawlessness that opens you up to all the rest. Now, those of you who have been with us from the beginning of this exposition on lawlessness know that when I mention the word complacency, we are touching on the most critical matters. Here is why. Complacency prevents us from being transformed. And if we are not being transformed, we are not being set apart. We are not being saved. Along these lines, the relationship between complacency and disregard should be quite clear. To wit, if you are infected with the spirit of complacency, you will eventually operate in the spirit of disregard. It is inevitable. Now, this reality has little to no value for transgressors because they are wholly infected with lawlessness. On the other hand, there is immense value in this analysis for us, the true contenders for the seal of Elohim. Here is why. If you have ascended to the level of knowledge, then you have already eliminated complacency. Now, this being the case, the question of the hour is simply this: how can the relationship between complacency and disregard be enacted if you have already eliminated complacency? That, my friends, is the question. And we will begin to answer this question in this podcast. Let's get started. The house from whence they came. Now, first things first, we analyze this matter in phase one, and we concluded that it is much harder to maintain your rule over any degree of lawlessness than it is to establish rule. Here is why. Every degree of lawlessness will resist the reign of the Ruach of Elohim in your life, and they will conspire together to thwart the reign he has established. Matthew 12:43 through 45 is revealing. Now, when the unclean spirit goes out of a man, he goes through dry places, seeking rest and finds none. Then it says, I shall return to my house from which I came. And when it comes, it finds it empty, swept, and decorated. Then it goes and takes with it 7 other spirits more wicked than itself, and they enter and dwell there. And the last of that man is worse than the first. So shall it also be with this wicked generation. Now, there are many key takeaways from this passage. And if you recall, we analyzed these in End Times 350, Life After Your Victory Over Doubt, which was posted on October 7th, 2024. Once again, I'm telling you, find the time to listen to this podcast. Remember, there is nothing more important in this quest than a firm foundation. And trust me, there is no greater investment of your time than your pursuit of everlasting life. Now, there is a key revelation in End Times 350 that is germane to this discussion, and I will restate it at this time. Every degree of lawlessness has the same nature of the unclean spirit which is feeding it, and thus we conclude the battles you fight with any degree of lawlessness will be more intense after you establish reign over that degree. Ergo, even though you eliminated complacency at the first, you must continue to go to battle with him. And these battles will be much worse. And Yahushua Messiah tells us why. It is because he has help. He has called for reinforcements. Now, the question we should chiefly entertain is this: why will the degrees of lawlessness you have defeated call up reinforcements to initiate a new campaign against you? Why will they invest time and resources trying to reignite a war they have already lost? The answer is as dire as it is sure, and I have told you this before. And yet, I will remind you at this time with a revelation of truth. Spiritual viruses have little to no impact in the world of physics if they are unable to infect a human host. Ergo, they spend much of their time looking for a human host they can infiltrate and infect. And the human host they know best is the house from whence they came. The power to infect us with error. Now, for the sake of time, I will not go into the details of this process, and yet I will direct you to End Times 370, The Power of Spiritual Strategy, which was posted on November 11th, 2024, and End Times 371, an intro to obedience, part 1, which was posted on November 13th, 2024. Believe me, these are matters of spiritual life and death. And if you review these podcasts and receive the knowledge the Ruach has shared, you will receive great spiritual enlightenment. Now, as it pertains to this lesson, it is important that you realize that disregard is at this juncture in league with complacency. To wit, disregard is one of the reinforcements he called up after he was defeated. Now, it goes without saying that this is the worst case spiritual scenario for anyone who has ascended to the level of knowledge. And yet, seeing as it is possible and the first path the enemy will take, we must analyze it. Along these lines, you must consider why complacency is the deadliest degree at this interval. Besides the fact that complacency opens you up to every other degree of lawlessness, it is for the following reason. Get this. Of the 16 degrees situated at the foundation of lawlessness, complacency has the greatest power to cause spiritual blindness. Now, this speaks to why complacency and disregard are another example of two of the deadliest poisons when taken together. For they are two of the most powerful drivers of spiritual blindness. And when they are teamed together, they make it almost impossible to stop the progression of ignorance. For that reason, the majority who become reinfected with complacency at this juncture will move on to the focal degree of ignorance and the third of the 16 deadliest degrees of lawlessness. Enter error. Now, it should be quite clear how disregard and complacency lead to error. Vis-a-vis, if you are complacent concerning the Father's will and you disregard any of his commands, you will always, and I repeat, always fall into error. That said, I caution you to remember who we are talking about. To wit, we are not talking about spiritual flunkies who are swimming in error. Quite the contrary, we are talking about men and women who have unlocked the girdle of truth. Along these lines, it is very difficult for the enemy to ensnare us with error. Ergo, he must find a way to blind us to the error. Enter complacency and disregard, two poisons that, when taken together, have the power to generate the requisite measure of spiritual blindness to infect us with the error. And in doing so, they will push us further into the progression of ignorance. The pathway into error. Now, the fact that the enemy will go through great lengths deploying his deadliest combination to bring us into error says a lot about the great power and devastation of error. My dear friends, if you pay attention and look, listen, the enemy will always eventually show you his crooked hand. Along these lines, it should be quite clear that the enemy is desperate to infect you with error. Why? It is because error has the power to neutralize the girdle of truth, which makes sense, for it is aligned with the primary objective of ignorance. Get this. as the primary objective of knowledge is to receive Yahuwah's will. The primary objective of ignorance is to prevent you from ever receiving Yahuwah's will. This is why error should be considered as a secret weapon, for it has the power to neutralize the primary feature within your spiritual arsenal that unites and activates every weapon within the whole armor of Elohim. Here is how. By neutralizing the girdle of truth, error corrupts the process in which your beliefs are converted into knowledge, which makes it impossible for you to receive the Father's will. And as the result of this crucial setback is regression and terrific loss, we must consider a definition of error. By definition, an error is an act or condition of ignorant and or imprudent deviation from a code of behavior, belief in something that is untrue, a mistake in a matter of fact or law, a deficiency or imperfection in structure or function. Now, it should be clear to see from this definition how dangerous it is for any of us to fall into error. And we can tie this great danger with the word of truth. James 5:19 through 20 is revealing, brothers, if anyone among you errs from the truth and someone turns him back, let him know that he who turns a sinner from the error of his way shall save a life from death and cover a great number of sins. 2 Peter 3:17 is revealing, you then, beloved ones, being forewarned, watch lest you also fall from your own steadfastness, being led away with the error of the lawless. Now, there are many key takeaways from these passages, and yet, for the sake of time, I will only focus on two. First and foremost, James makes it very clear that it is possible for you to fall into error even if you are wearing the girdle of truth. Notwithstanding, as serious as this matter is, and as daunting as it may seem to some, I caution you, have no fear and do not doubt. Let me tell you something. The fact that a worst case scenario is possible does not mean it is plausible. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to insulate yourself from every worst case scenario to the point where it is not only implausible, but it is also impossible. And the first step on this path is insulating yourself from fear and doubt. Remember, if you are driven by fear, the thing you fear will become your reality. You, my friend, will err from the truth. That said, the best way to insulate yourself from fear and doubt is by being spiritually yoked with true believers who have strong convictions. For convictions are the antidote for fear and doubt. Now, this speaks to the second takeaway the Ruach is leading me to address. To wit, Peter warns us that the easiest way we could fall into error is by being associated with those who are operating in lawlessness, i.e., the assembly of the unrighteous. My dear friends, I trust you are seeing how Yahuwah is giftedly harmonizing all the podcasts in this exposition of lawlessness with the podcast in my Watchmen series. Look here. If you are spiritually yoked with false believers, you will eventually embrace the error that makes their beliefs false. And Peter is telling you why. It's because you fell from steadfastness. To wit, you became complacent. My dear friends, this is why the Ruach led me to initiate this podcast by restating the great danger of complacency. Not only this, but he wants you to know that you will realize this great danger if you are spiritually yoked with the assembly of the unrighteous. If you are, trust me, you will begin to disregard the facets of Yahuwah's will that they are disregarding, after which you will fall into the error that they have fallen into. And the worst part is you won't even know it, for you have compromised the operations of the girdle of truth. This, my friends, is the pathway into error. I suggest you avoid it at all costs. Now, here is the final word. Yahuwah's will became a terror, and so he gave them up to error. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, the primary reason why many within our nation are falling into error is because they are terrified of Yahuwah's will. To wit, they are terrified of walking by faith and not by sight. And this is precisely why they will fall into error. For he who walks by sight cannot see. For where there is no faith, there can be no truth. And where there is no truth, men will never be free. Heretofore, I recommend, if you want to be free from the error destroying our nation, do your best to do his will. And every day, let him find you watching, waiting, and pressing still. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on today's lesson. And if you have any questions, please submit them using the form at pinnacleofholiness.com. And I will respond to you as soon as I can. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 504, The Spiritual Disease of Ignorance, Part 4. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 505, The Spiritual Disease of Ignorance, Part 5. I will post this podcast on Wednesday, September 10th, 2025. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch. Continue to pray. Continue in fasting. And most of all, continue to be focused. For the end is coming. The end is near.